Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to begin. I want to thank you for coming to our panel discussion. Let's talk about it, creating an inclusive environment for the town home. I want to say that this is a discussion, not a debate. We came together as a collective group to try to move forward with some of the racial injustice that's been going on and to answer the questions that will help us service the children in our care at our early child care centers. I'm going to take a moment to say that Black Lives Matter, that we can say everyone's name who has been affected by the social injustice that we've been seeing in recent months. These people are our parents, our brothers and sisters, our neighbors, our coworkers, and you might even need to say your name. In light of the homegoing of John Lewis, who was an avid crusader for racial justice and for the lives of so many that has lost, we're going to take a moment of silence. Okay. I am going to read the bio of our panelists. First, we have Kadeem Lawrence from Giving of Self Partnership Child Development Center. Kadeem Lawrence is the Assistant Director of Giving of Self. He has his bachelor's in early childhood education and is working to earn his master's degree in early childhood education. He's an advocate promoting leadership in early childhood field, and he will be presenting in this year's Early Childhood Summit at Penn State in collaboration with the A2E Summit with Widener University in cultural relevance and sustaining education, along with myself. Welcome, Kadeem. Next, we have Lizette Woods. Lizette is the owner and director of Just My Size Learning Center, located in Philadelphia. She provides care for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Her center is creating a cultural model to support the needs of children with social and emotional needs, which also includes a family participation and holistic approach that is deeply rooted in spiritual faith. Ms. Lizette has a master's degree in early childhood education. Welcome, Lizette. Next, I have Munirah Abdullah. She is the owner director of Munirah's Learning Center, located in the Logan area of Philadelphia. She provides services for infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Her centers have a curriculum based on a Montessori theory. This is to support the social and emotional needs of mainly her 75% enrollment of African-American young boys. Munirah Learning Center is one that is recommended list from our special education supportive services. And Munirah has her educational background in early childhood education. Welcome, Munirah. And next we have Selena Oliver. She is a mother of 2 young children, and she is the owner of a family child care center, Promise and Possibilities Learning Academy, located in West Philadelphia. Her facility has recently achieved the NAFCC accreditation, moving her facility from a star 2 from a star 4 in just 1 year. She's earned her bachelor's degree at Temple University and is currently working on her master's degree and teaching certification at Drexel University. Her last 11 years have been to work to educate and empower young children. She believes in empowering the ECE professionals to help children create opportunities that will allow them to achieve beyond limits and create a better future for us all. Welcome, Selena. Next, I have Miss Shirley Scatliffe. She is also the owner director of Giving a Self Partnership, located in the Logan area of Philadelphia. She provides services for children birth to 5 in the after-school program. Ms. Shirley has a strong passion for teaching science and has been doing this for years, not only in her center, but also in collaboration with the School District of Philadelphia. And she also has a strong advocacy policy for including families to participate in their children's curriculum and early learning experience. Ms. Scatliffe has her education degree, her master's degree in education. And then for our expert panelists, I have Kevin Hubbard, who we all know is our wellness coach. He's a licensed professional counselor. Kevin has both his master's and his master's degree in counseling psychology from Temple University. He works with private practice group in Philadelphia and also worked with children, adolescents, and adults in the African-American community for the last 12 years. He has a thorough understanding in the challenges of working in early child care. Welcome, Kevin, again. And last but not least, we have Dr. Tayibah Bemiah. I hope I didn't mess up your last name. She is currently the assistant professor of special education at Lincoln University School of Adult and Continuing Education. She has 2 decades of experience in serving families in Philadelphia in the field of education and psychology. Dr. Bemiah began her career in 2002 when she graduated Lincoln University with her bachelor's, and she graduated in Lincoln also with her master's degree in working with the School District of Philadelphia with special education. She continues her study to obtain a graduate degree in that field at Cheney. Through multiple assignments in schools and through this District of Philadelphia, she has encountered urban students that suffer through trauma and untreated mental health challenges. Her experiences with trauma, coupled with the dedication and commitment to underserved families, led to her pursuit of additional graduate degree as in counseling psychology at the School of Psychology at Immaculate University. She also realized that a truly impact would have to turn attention to educating teachers and lead to obtain a doctorate in educational administration, concentration in special education at Goodwood Mercy University. We'd like to thank her. So welcome to all my panelists. I want to say that this panel discussion will be based on 4 questions that our literacy and early learning spaces team have gotten from our teachers and our directors about what issues they wanted to discuss and gain more knowledge when it came to how to create an inclusive environment in early childhood education. With no further ado, then I will begin with my first question. Our first question: why should we talk about race to young children? And I am going to start off with Selena.
Hi, everybody. So to answer that question, I kind of have another question. Why not, right? Because children are not colorblind. Right. Research shows us that as early as 6 months, they begin to have a preference based off of differences. And then at 4 years old, they even pick their playmates based off of race, and they form prejudices around this age. In my experience with working with the kids in my care, they even ask about this. You know, they make statements and they have questions. So to ignore it and not teach about race allows children to draw their own conclusions, right? So when it's important for us to talk about it. If research shows us that talking about it improves racial attitudes and actually lowers the levels of bias that children will have. So as early childhood educators, it's our job to present them with the information they need to make informed decisions. And when we have these conversations with them, we want to talk about not only celebrations, but we want to talk about the nature and scope of structural inequities. So we can do this by recognizing that there are different races in our care, that children will see different races. And then we need to teach them that in these different races, everyone has something that they can bring to the table, and we can learn from each other.
That is so true. Thank you. Appreciate that. Lizette, do you have anything you want to add?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, the question, why should we address racism or race in early childhood education? Because our students, uh, they, like Selena said, they begin to um, form a preference. They begin to acknowledge and recognize caregivers according to their race. And so when we take care of children or provide care for them, we need to first acknowledge our bias. We need to first acknowledge that we may have a speck in our eye. And before we address racism with maybe the families or the parents or even the children, we have to address how we feel about racism, right? We have to address race because if we silent, then we conform, right? So silence means conformity. So we don't want to be silent and let children um, form their own opinions on race because they may form the wrong opinion. So we always want to lead them and expose to them to appropriate behavior, right? So we want to lead them and expose them to how to interact with children and adults of other races.
Thank you. Yes, that is so true. I'm going to go to Kevin.
Good afternoon, everyone. That's a great question, Dionne. And I think I'm gonna come at that question a little bit different. But I think first and foremost, we teach children numbers, we teach children shapes, we teach them color. What's the point of teaching them about color if we are walking around acting like we're colorblind? You know, there's a lot of color in the world. There's a lot of vibrance in this world. And I think that talking about all of it as opposed to portions of it is extremely important in just helping with the development of the social emotional aspects of, you know, what a child goes through. They see those differences. As I believe Selena said, you know, as early as like 6 months, they start to see, you know, these distinctions. I think as early as 30 months, in one of the articles you sent, they start to develop in-group bias. So again, I'll kind of echo what Selena said. Why not? You know, we need to talk about this with our children. They need to have a very basic understanding. And a lot of people may say, well, why are we talking about this with children? They're just kids. We're taking away their innocence. But what's the cost of not talking about it? If you think about, okay, if we ignore it, if we overshadow it, if we, you know, kind of cover it up or sweep it under the rug, what are we doing? You know, so I think that it's important to talk about. It's paramount to a child's development in order to understand those differences in a meaningful way. But yes, we should be talking about it all day, every day. I don't know why we stop talking about it sometimes, but we need to be talking about it all the time. Like, you know. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Tayibah, would you like to add? Ooh. All right, we'll come back to Tayibah. I think she's having some problems with her microphone. We'll get her response. But for now, we'll move on to question 2. Question 2 is, what should we do as educators to prepare ourselves for the conversation, right? Now we know we need to talk about this to children. And how do we discuss race with children? I'm going to ask Ms. Shirley and Kadeem who start this conversation.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello.
As educator, I think that we are in a very unique position because they're with us for a long period of time first, and we have an opportunity to share with them from a literacy perspective with books. We can discuss the conversation. Children have a lot of questions. And most of the time it's not being addressed in the, you know, in the way that it needs to be addressed. So I think that as educators, we first need to understand the culture of the children that we're working with. We need to have some family background on the children that we are working with. So when we discussing, we don't want to bring in our own biasness, because sometimes we can be biased for the lack of knowledge. So as educators, it's very important before we even address these issues with children that we address the issues within ourselves. And make sure that we are comfortable with dealing with the children them and their culture and respecting people's culture, not saying that one is better than another, but show them that our differences still makes us the same.
Right.
And helping them to understand, because we have a very diverse group of children. And I realize as adults and educators that when we embrace the children them of multiple different colors and different race, our children picks up the same attitude. Children who are different with disability, when we embrace it, children embrace it. So we basically are one of the primary teachers along with their parents. They're with us a little longer, I would say. And like I said, and there is a whole lot of books that you could introduce and open conversations, throughout, not just on a Black History Month, but all throughout the year.
Right. Thank you. Kadeem, to add to that?
No, I'm taking question 4.
Okay. Let me go. If her microphone is working. Tayibah, is your microphone working now?
I don't know. How does it sound?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, can I just go back? First of all, good afternoon, everyone. And it's such a pleasure to be here with all of you, speaking about something that's so important right now. So I just wanted to first say good afternoon. And can I just skip back to question 1 really quickly?
Yes,
talk about that. So in my experience over the years, what we know is that children kind of have a very concrete knowledge of fair and unfair. Around 3, 4, 5, they start to use this is fair and this is not fair. They also are very in tune to those differences that the other panelists spoke about. So I think if we can frame our conversation with children using those 2 concepts, just to kind of start the conversation early, just talking about fair and unfair and differences and color, that will allow us to gauge kind of what our children are thinking, and then how do we then start to lead and guide that conversation for them. Because I think what's most important is for them to feel open to expressing themselves so that we have an idea of what it is that they're thinking and feeling, so then we can know what resources we need to provide, how do we need to address these thoughts and feelings and correct if need be. So I think that that's a huge part of it. But I think that also we have to look at, as far as what's developmentally appropriate for them as well. And so I'll get to that part in another question, but I just wanted to say that for question 1.
Yes, thank you. If you want to, you can also, I think you kind of really covered it in question 2. So thank you. Lizette, I'll go to you.
So how should we discuss race with children? I think our educators, our teachers need to have race in their curriculum, right? So they need to make that a part of their daily regimen, as I think Kevin said before. And so we need to assist them and help them add that to their curriculum, add it to use their learning standards to talk about race with the children. I also think that, of course, our teachers need to know who they are. They need to, I think sometimes when we go to talk about race, we're thinking so big, and sometimes we just need to talk to the children on their level. Like Tayibah said, we need to use verbiage and language that they understand, that's developmentally appropriate, right? Because if we come to them with all these big words about racism and diversity, they're not going to understand, and they're not going to be able to grasp that concept. But if we, like she said, talk to them about fairness, and we bring that language we talk to our teachers, we have our team meetings, we talk to them about how we're going to bring up diversity, inclusion, and race in the classroom daily, along with, of course, books and materials, and not using stereotypes, because sometimes when we don't know about a culture or a race, we kind of go off what we see in the media, right? So we go off big singers or rappers, or we don't go there. Or in our history, we're talking about Harriet Tubman, but there's so many other civil rights activists other than Harriet Tubman. So we also have to expose our teachers to other resources, right? Just like Dionne and Stephanie and the library did with us. We have to expose our teachers to these resources so that they can utilize them into the classroom, and expose our children to appropriate behaviors when it comes to playing and engaging with children of other races.
Yes, thank you. That is so true. Kevin, would you like to add?
Sure. I think that, in preparing kids for these conversations, I think Ms. Shirley might have kind of alluded to that a little bit. We have to start with ourselves. We can't possibly have these, conversations with children if we don't first off start with ourselves and figure out, like, okay, do I personally have unconscious bias? Do I personally have things about myself that I know I need to work on? I've said this before, but we have to be willing to do the hard work, the deep work, and that also requires deep listening. As far as being able to, address a child's question, I need to be able to look at myself in the mirror and be like, you know what, this is how I think, and this might need to change within me. But in having conversations with other people and other colleagues and other professionals, I think that, spaces like this are just like so important, so that we can have the conversation, so that when we do go back to our classrooms, we do go back to our centers, when we do go back to meet with our children, we at least have not only the competence, but the confidence to have these conversations in a meaningful way. So I think as far as the first question and the second question, it's never too early, but also we need to be willing to do some work on ourselves in order to kind of really push and think about, what is it about race that makes us uncomfortable? What is it about race that, really I struggle with? If I'm, in a predominantly, white space, do I feel differently if I'm in a Black space? Am I more comfortable there? If even when it comes to my students, do I have a lot of white students versus Black students? Doing that deeper work and really seeing if there are patterns, if there are themes in my own personal beliefs and behavior and value system.
Yes, that is so true. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing it. Go ahead.
Okay. So I agree with everything. Addressing those internal bias are extremely important, because those are sometimes things that we have thoughts about that we're not addressing, but then in turn they come out in another way in the classroom or in your interactions with children. So that is extremely important. Doing that self-work to make sure that you're not bringing those biases in the classroom or in your everyday interactions with people, just period. So in regards to discussing having these difficult conversations with children, I would say that based on my research, a lot of events that happen and this look like me, or children notice that this has happened to this person and this person looks like me, those are very meaningful for children. They seem to identify with those events a little bit more than other events. So I would just simply 4 steps, use simple language when addressing these things with children. Remember, we want to keep it developmentally appropriate, age appropriate. Let them lead the conversation. A lot of times children will come to you with a concern or a question. And when they feel like they've had enough of the conversation, they know how to stop. So let them lead and let them naturally tailor it off when they're done. Provide short answers. We can't go off on tangents because we lose them. We have to give them exactly what they're asking for. And then also respond to specific questions. I think that's huge in dealing with these types of conversations with children. As adults, these conversations allow us to observe the information children, what they're really seeking. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? How do we address this information? And what do we need to provide in terms of resources to further their understanding? I think it's really important also to teach children how to celebrate differences, maybe having play dates or grouping children with other students that don't look like them. Celebrations through literature and holidays, music, hands-on activities, things that they can remember and kind of relate back to, oh, this is different, but different doesn't mean bad. Different still means good and it's okay. So kind of, you know, making it an all-inclusive kind of ongoing conversation. It shouldn't be a one and done thing. This needs to be as something that we readdress over and over again, because this is something that our children are going to have to keep encountering in their lives. And the more we address it, the more prepared they will be to address it appropriately.
Thank you, Scatliffe. That's so true.
And can we also just say too that it's okay not to have all the answers? I think as educators, we just want to answer all the questions, right? We're the experts. Everyone's looking to us, especially during this time. And it's okay to tell children, I don't have the answer to that right now, but I'll look further into it, right? We have to be honest with them so that we're just not putting our own opinions on them, right? So I just thought that was important to say as well.
Yes, that is so true. It is. Thank you, Lizette. If there are not any more responses for question number 2, I'm gonna move to question number 3.
I have a response. I'm sorry. I think also, instead of educating our staff, we need to educate the parents also, because the parents don't know. They and we need to let them know what we're doing so we all could be on the same page also.
That is so important. Yes. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on to question number 3. So how should we discuss current events with children or students? We see a lot with the writing, we see a lot with the marching and everything to support social injustice that is going on. We need to think about that kind of thing. How do we move with that? I am going to start with Tayibah with that one.
So I think with some of the images that are, of course, obviously troubling for a young child to see, we need to try to limit access to those images as well. I would also limit certain conversations around children that just, they don't understand. I think that, during this time of early childhood, a child's brain is growing exponentially. They are making so many, their brain is making so many leaps and bounds. It's just amazing at that time. Their brain is meant to absorb and suck in all the information. And so they're learning so much in just that birth to 5-year-old period. So I think it's interesting that they're observing, they're listening, they're watching, they're modeling. But even though their brains are making these leaps and bounds, in development, their reasoning skills are not matched with how their brain is developing. So while they're seeing these images and hearing these conversations, their reasoning skills aren't really developing at the same level. So I think it's important to limit access to some of those images and conversations that they may not be ready for because they just don't understand. It's too complex. But I think it's important for caregivers to try to help their children understand, process, and manage what they are feeling, because they are seeing and they are hearing things. And there's certain times we just can't keep everything away from them. So we have to teach them how to manage those feelings. I would really limit the disturbing images and conversations. I would really try to limit that to the best of my ability if I was in this situation. But as far as a child's safety, protecting them, even when parents or caregivers have specific concerns about a child, I think just that is very anxiety producing for a child. So that's something that we really have to guard our children against as caregivers and parents. And that's what I think I would do as far as current events.
Thank you. Kevin, would you like to add to that?
Yes, absolutely. I second everything that Dr. Bemiah said about limiting exposure. I think it's really important, first and foremost, to treat this almost like trauma. You know, with trauma in particular, you know, people look at trauma and they're like, oh, this thing happened, you know, and now I feel a certain kind of way. It's like, well, we have to think of like the full deleterious effects of trauma. What is it? It's okay, so something happens and it's in our past, but in the present, I'm struggling with safety. I don't feel safe. I don't feel good. I feel anxious. I feel afraid. I'm fearful. And sometimes when those feelings are coming up for us personally, like I said, if we're doing that deep work, we have to address our own concerns about these things. I can only imagine what it's like for a child to be exposed to something like that. And then in her mind, as Dr. Bemiah said, like, try to make sense of it. Like, how can I make sense of, okay, I see a car on fire, or I see people breaking in windows. How do I make sense of that? And is that okay? Is that something that I'm allowed to do? Is that something that's appropriate? You know, kids have questions. So I think when they see those types of things, we have to almost treat it like trauma-informed care, you know, as if we're, you know, working through any other type of trauma, you know, whether that's, you know, community-related violence, or whether that's, you know, violence and things that they might see on TV that they're not supposed to see, you know, things of that nature. We have to be really, really cognizant of exposure, and then also like the side effects of what exposure can do, and then the long-term effects of what kind of schema that creates for a kid.
That is so true. Yes, thank you. Would anybody else like to add their thoughts? All right. I will move on to question number 4, which is, how do I prepare our parents about conversations that we will be having in our classroom that are outside our curriculum, in light of what we just discussed about the protests and the social injustice that we're seeing? I know our conversations kind of led up to this question. You know we need to talk about it. We know as educators, we need to check our bias and get more information and supplies that we can do to get support to children. I know one way that we may want to inform the parents is by writing a letter, you know, and let them know that you're going to have this conversation in your classroom. So I want to get, Kadeem, you can start off that.
So as with this topic, I know parents are going to be anxious and concerned. So as educators, we have to be prepared to deal with them, the anxiety of the parent. So I know I put down writing newsletters, sending books home that parents can use, because most of the time parents don't have the resources to explain something. That's why they have anxiety about certain topics. And being open and being available for parents that do have concerns about the topic, through like at the end of the day or in the morning or through a phone call.
Yes, thank you. Some very important tips. Selena, would you like to share, please?
Sure. I was thinking starting off maybe with a survey. So kind of surveying the parents to see what their thoughts are. And not so much their thoughts in regards to, should we be doing this, but is this work important? I think most parents would agree that these topics are important, that the conversation should maybe start happening. So once you kind of have them saying, yes, okay, this is important information. And then if there is some pushback, or if they are uncomfortable, you can kind of say, well, you know, your survey indicated that you were interested in, you know, you see the value in this, but you know, what's this anxiety? What is this that you're feeling? So you can have this dialogue with the parent and really understand what it is that they're feeling, so that you can address that. I believe that someone said earlier, providing resources, I think that's huge, because once we start these conversations in school, then the conversations may start to happen at home. And so we want to make sure our parents are prepared for whatever children are going to come home with, whatever questions they may have. And we want to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page with what's being said in school and what's following up at home. Additionally, newsletters are always great. Hands-on activities, I think, are awesome as well, to kind of give parent and child a chance to work on something together, but also celebrate in some way a form of diversity or a different culture, but also allow them to talk about differences. And so framing a conversation that's more positive and not so much about maybe the negative images that the children are seeing, which will provoke more difficult conversations at home. And then also I would provide the parents with additional resources, whether it's websites, books, journal articles, just so that they feel more prepared that if a conversation does open up at home that they're not ready for, that they would have read over some things or saw some things so that they feel more able to answer any questions that a child might have.
Okay, thank you. Selena, I'm gonna try to get to you.
So I agree with what everybody said. I think it's important that we just communicate with, whenever I'm starting a new topic with the children, I always send home information to the parents, if it's through the newsletter or if I send a message or a letter home, but I always let them know what we will be talking about, because I forget who said it, but whatever you talk about in school, it does spill over at home. You know, they want to share. So they're going to talk to their parents about it. And the parents may not have all the information that they need to answer the question. So I send, you know, information home for the parents so that they will be able to answer the questions. And I also, there was an article that was sent about this topic. And I think one important thing that it mentioned is that when you tell parents that you're going to be talking about this, you might want to do it in person, like a verbal conversation, because sometimes things get lost when you're through email or paper communication. So when you have face-to-face conversations, you can better gauge how they feel, and they can understand you a little bit better, your intent a little bit better. And then I try to be proactive about things. Like in my handbook, I have certain policies to let parents know my stance on how we will be handling certain things. It's not always, you know, a proactive thing. Like right now, I'm kind of reactive about it because I'm just now creating a social justice policy, but it'll be in place for future families, you know, so that parents know where I stand and how I will be handling it in the future.
Thank you, Selena. I think that's so important for you to incorporate that in your family handbook, and so they can know expectations and what should be accepted. And I have some inclination, I'm sure Abdullah is going to be demanding that we have that kind of policy. So you are ahead of the curve, and maybe we need to create some type of coalition group to support each other in writing that. Kevin, would you like to add?
Yes, I love what Selena said about the face-to-face. When I was working in the center, when I was the inclusion specialist, I would always encourage my directors, like, as opposed to sending a letter or writing an email or texting somebody, like, go talk to them. Like, and just like, you know, in these kinds of formats, like what we're doing right now, this work, these are the places where I would invite parents. Like, I would want them to be in person, you know, even though this is virtual. You know, as a therapist, I'm still getting used to this virtual thing. I'm like, oh God, yeah, I love face-to-face because it means more when you're in front of the person and you're able to kind of like read body language, see how they kind of like receive the information. But I think, like I said, just inviting them in, like bringing them in. And then also in terms of the centers, like really just trying to create that culture within our own centers. I've been in a lot of centers all throughout the city of Philadelphia, and I can say they're not all created equal. Some of them are very inclusive. Some of them are very much, you know, come get your kid. It's 3 o'clock. You need to come pick them up type attitude. You know, so when we're, you know, really getting to the details and really talking about like how do we include the parents, like it's about really meeting them where they are and feeling like we have you know, a bridge, as opposed to feeling like there's a gap between, you know, us as the providers and then the parents as the consumer. You know, I wanted to kind of echo some things that you know, mentioned earlier, Dionne, about John Lewis, and I know he had that one famous quote, which was, you know, you have a moral obligation to do something. You know, when you see these racial issues and these kinds of things pop up, we have a moral obligation to do something. So as the providers, if we're looking out into the world and we're seeing this stuff happening, what are we doing if we're not addressing it with our parents? What are we doing if we're sitting on our thumbs and being like, well, whatever goes on at their home is whatever goes on at their home? No, we want to see different things in our world. We want to see those changes happen, but we have to be realistic. You know, the only way that's going to happen is by talking about it. The only way that's going to happen is by having that, you know, face-to-face contact, by having that real, you know, unadulterated, unfiltered conversation. Yes, they are difficult. Yes, they are hard. But I think, you know, the greatest crime that we can commit is not talking about it. You know, that if we sit idly by and we just say, well, you know, they'll be okay. You know, they just like, we can't reach that family. That family, they're good. Or we just assume that everything is fine in other families. You know, we have to be very, you know, cognizant of what we're doing. And I think, you know, just overall, we need to be informed ourselves to be able to have these conversations. So I love these formats. I love that, you know, we're talking about this. And I guess my hope is seeing parents in these rooms next time around.
Yes, thank you. If anybody else would like to comment, I'll wait. Okay, so what I like to do with our last couple of minutes, I see that if you are watching this panel, you have a question for our panelists as an attendee, you can put it in the box. And while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go around and get some last words and comments from everyone that they would like to share with our attendees. Selena, can I start with you?
I don't really have much to share. I think we did a good job talking about all the topics that were discussed. I just think that, well, I work with Black and Brown children, and I just want to remind everybody that it's important that we empower them, let them know that they are equally as great as everyone around them, and that we just give them the tools to be successful.
Thank you, thank you. I have a question popping up. I'm going to ask Tayibah to answer this one. I don't know if you can see it, but I'll read it. It says, can you model how you would answer a question from a child about skin color? Why is my skin this color? Or why is their skin dark, light, brown, white, etc. like that?
Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm sorry, you broke up kind of in the middle of the question. Could you just repeat it again for me, Dionne?
Sure, no problem. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It says, can you model how you would answer a question from a child about skin color? Why my skin is this color, or why that my skin or their skin is dark, light, black, brown, white, or etc.
So I would try to keep that answer as simple as possible. That sounds to me like a geography lesson, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if you live in certain parts of the world, you're going to look this way. If you live in, you know, so I would kind of make it more along those lines and tie it into geography, and then bring it back to, so because we are from Africa, or because we are from Jamaica, or because we are from Puerto Rico, we look this way. And so I would kind of take it back full circle, but that sounds like a geography lesson to me. If I put my teacher hat on, my elementary education teacher hat on,
right,
that sounds like to me.
Yeah.
And then maybe you can tie in other ways where you can talk about, and once you do discuss those different areas of the world, what are some of their cultures? What are some of their foods? You know, just there's so many extensions to how you can answer that question. A lot of times, like I was saying before, children will kind of cut off when they've had enough information. So you can go on and on and on and tie in as much as you can, and they'll understand. And then when they've had enough, they kind of say, okay, and that's it.
That's so true. I think Lizette or Selena commented on that about letting the children guide the conversation. And you can tell when they're done and they got their answer. It's like, oh, okay. Or they look at you like, that don't make any sense. So you know you need to elaborate some more. So that is so true. Kevin, did you want to say anything? I saw you like, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess, you know, to not get too graphic, you know, just be like, you know, when mommies and daddies love each other very much, you know, but, you know, really just talking about skin color, we're talking about like, you know, well, so-and-so's parents look this way, and
right.
You know, they had a baby, and that's why so-and-so looks this, like keeping it super simple.
It can be tricky though with the had a baby part.
Right. Minus that. Right.
I understand, yes. Okay.
That's why I said keep the geography. Let's not even dig into that.
Yeah.
I like that approach. I like that approach.
And I think also just letting them know, giving them affirmations during that time as well, because sometimes they may think, you don't know what they're thinking, right? So you just want to encourage them that because you may be a lighter skin with lighter eyes or darker eyes, that you are beautiful and that you are loved. And I am your teacher and I love you the way you are. And thank you for being in the classroom and contributing, because children that ask those kind of questions, they are our next leaders, right? So
Yes,
we want to encourage them. You know, when children ask questions, we are building critical thinkers, and we want to build critical thinkers.
Yes.
So we never want to shut that or shy away from those kind of conversations. You know, I want you to know that your Black is beautiful, your light is beautiful, and that we are all a melting pot, and we can work together in this classroom to make this classroom a success, right? I also wanted to just address the parent piece as well. I think letting the parents that opportunity to talk to you, because we have to realize sometimes the parents have experienced some distress, some discrimination, some social injustice that they haven't dealt with. And so having maybe a list of therapists on file or networking with some therapists.
That's why we got Kevin.
They can, yes, with Kevin, so that they can have an outlet, because sometimes their bias spill over to the children as well, right? So we want to make sure the family unit is whole as well, and those parents are whole. So we want to give them opportunities to express themselves in a safe place as well.
Thank you so much, Lizette.
I add on to that. I'm sorry. I just wanted to, I agree with everything that said, but I also, I agree. And I wanted to add that oftentimes our children have these images that they're constantly seeing on TV. And it looks like a certain racial group is beautiful, or the way this looks is, you know, the preference of what the standard of beauty is. And so a lot of times our children suffer these insults that we don't even know about, because they're internalizing all these images all day long on computers, on TV. And so they begin to say, well, why is this group of people always on TV? Why is this group of people on TV, but they're always the bad group? And I look like that. And so they start to identify and categorize. And so I think it's important what Lizette said, the encouraging piece, the nurturing, the support, because we know they're classifying and they're identifying and they are assigning color with people. And now they can assign color with good and bad. And so how does a child internalize that if no one's having those conversations, and also no one is providing that encouragement? So I really wanted to really second what Lizette said, because that's awesome. And it's the second part the second point, if we have parents who have had some negative experiences and encounters with police officers, there have been conversations in the house. And so our children are taught to believe that police are good. So what happens when we have a contradiction, because now the parent has had an experience and now the child has to think, well, wait a minute. And again, their reasoning skills aren't what adults are. So we have to always be mindful of the conversations we have and what's being modeled and what's being spoken about in front of them, because they're in their mind, like I have a 5-year-old and he'll say, well, police are good. That's what they're taught to believe. And so when we have bad experiences, or if I get anxious when I get pulled over, children internalize that. They notice that, well, why is mommy upset? Why is she afraid? So I think, you know, just providing that support and nurturing is huge in this whole conversation, because overall they have to feel supported.
That is so true. Yes, I want to thank Lizette for bringing up that affirmation. We definitely have to have affirmations in our centers if we are servicing our Black and Brown communities. I know I have several centers in particular that just have an affirmation they do every morning as part of this morning circle. And that's that encouragement, that empowerment. You start your day on the right foot, sort of. You know, if you had a bad day, say on the words that I am strong and beautiful, resilient. It's kind of like setting the tone for your day, even though you may have been running late or missed breakfast or mom and dad had an argument or something. You know, it's just like, it's a breath. And children need that as much as we need that, you know, to get started on a right foot. Miss Shirley, would you like to add some closing remarks?
Well, my closing remark would be that we have to really re-educate our children, re-educate our parents. And the reason why I say that, coming from my culture over here, I got a real shock. I mean, I understood here when I got here that I was African American. When I was over there, we all got along, so it didn't matter you know, and I actually loved myself very, very much. So when I came over here, you know, and I met other children, African-American children, and they didn't want to play with the African dolls, and, you know, it was a lot of stereotyping. And I was just, you know, I had to step back, re-examine what I was seeing. You know, it was a culture shock for me, because never have I seen our children don't feel comfortable in their skin.
Right.
And it extends from somewhere, and it extends from, like I said, their generation, their parents before. So we have to really re-educate our children and parents, our families, to be comfortable and to accept, you know, the beauty of their skin. You know, like I've been here for 30 years, and I'm still find myself going over this with children. Well, why you don't want the African-American doll? I don't care how pretty the doll is. They isolate her and put her in the corner. And I said, but she's pretty. Nah, I like my Becky doll. I said, huh?
That is so true.
Yeah, so like, you know.
Who know you, can you let them know where you're originally from?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm from the St. Thomas Virgin Islands.
Yes. Yes. I just want to make that clear. And I know many of our educators who are from the islands have experienced the same thing when they come here to the States. You know, Tayibah, maybe you want to speak on that, because originally, I mean, to the face, you would think you were born and bred here in America, but will you talk about where you're originally from and, you know, your thoughts on that?
So my family is originally from West Africa, Ghana. So I was born here, but I've traveled there. I go there about every other year, and it's been a few months every other year. And I've had the opportunity when I was there to visit a lot of different schools. And so just to see, number one, that they don't have all the resources we have. However, there are other issues that are completely not an issue at all. I feel like we have so much here, and sometimes maybe too much in some ways, but they have less, but they're doing so much. It actually it is a breath of fresh air when I go and see so many motivated children. I mean, 40, 50 kids in one room, and they are just hands up, eager to learn. You know, I mean, it's amazing. It's like completely different. So my father came here in the 70s. He came as a student. And he and I have had several conversations in the past regarding his experience coming here, being a student, and even my experience with the name Tayibah Bemiah. I've had people say to me, you know, of course they want to know what's the origin of the name. And then it's interesting how both African Americans and Caucasians have their own thought on what that is and what an African woman should look like, behave, and what I should know. So it's interesting, and I'm unpacking those biases for them when I have those conversations. Very nicely, but I do so.
Yes, we have to educate each other so we can grow deeper to stay woke.
Yes.
Nobody is fully woke, even though they like to say it's all a learning process for everybody.
Right.
So if there are no more closing remarks, I would again like to thank the panelists for taking your time. This is like a process for just prepping for this hour. Took a couple months. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Your directors, for those who are the attendees, we have resources for books that are going to be provided to help you incorporate more inclusive practices in your center from our program, Literacy and Early Learning Spaces at the library, as well as resources that your director has been given to. So I hope that you will maybe have a conversation afterwards. Look over the 4 questions and think about what you heard from your fellow directors and from our panelists, and find out where your position is and what can you do to move forward to make sure that we are really, truly supporting an inclusive environment for the young children who are our future leaders. And, you know, we have to think about that. And hopefully, yes, there will be a part 2. I know there's so much demand for it. And Kevin, I agree, we need some parents at the table for this. In light of John Lewis' final farewell, I would like to say, let's get in some good trouble. How about that?
Yes, I love it.
Then that Reid John Lewis, let's get in some good trouble. He did a letter to the New York Times just days before he knew who was passing. And I get in some good trouble with the folks on this panel. And I hope that we all can. And I'd like to say, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe and peace. And I shall see you soon.